Hey there, fellow trekkers. I'm Linda, your park ranger, here to introduce today's adventure. You might hear me in the background as we navigate the trail together. Today, we're setting off on an easy hike to explore how to analyze student data in Nearpod. Nearpod is an interactive instructional platform that allows educators to create engaging, multimedia-rich lessons with real-time student participation and feedback. But the best part? It tracks every student response and interaction, so you can make the most out of your lessons. As you explore, you can keep following the Nearpod Trail or blaze a new one. We've mapped out beginner, intermediate, and advanced trails for every level of EdTech hiker, covering a range of powerful classroom technology tools. Can't spot the next landmark on your journey? Check back soon. We're always adding new trails to explore. Even better, subscribe so you never miss a new path to discovery. Lace up your boots. It's time to hit the trail.
Cool. I will be sure to make this hike as painless as possible for all of you. If you were not a part of the first Nearpod trek that we did, I'm Amy Graham. I'm an instructional technology coach here for the LTC. And Nearpod has kind of become one of those tools that I lean on quite a bit with my teachers. And I will share why, just like I did in my first track, which is that Nearpod offers experiences for those that are tech savvy and experiences for those that have rarely picked up a digital tool in their classroom. It's very versatile. It can be used in all grade levels, all areas of study, and it just makes it one of those well-rounded tools where you can access it and get something that you need right away. So today we're going to be focusing on student data with Nearpod and accessing reports within there. A lot of people don't even know that there are reports that are even collected. So I think that this is the great next step from just your basic hike where we kind of explored Nearpod. So what I would like to do is today talk about that review for those that weren't a part of the first hike. I want to start with how do we even create an account and how do we get started within Nearpod? Very basic on that. And then we're going to dive into the reports. So if you've never used Nearpod before, don't panic. That's okay. You'll be able to pocket this for after your attempts at lessons with your class. And then after we talk about reports, I just want to make sure that we touch on, I'm not, anybody that has thoroughly studied data best practices, but I just want to make sure that we touch on those very, basic how to read reports and data and making sure that we're looking at this in the best way possible. And then we'll have some time for some Q&A and some final thoughts before we leave each other, just in case you need me. Let's talk about what reports are given when you've used lessons in Nearpod. To access your reports from your main screen, so from where your My Lessons are, you can see that the Nearpod library is here, My Lessons are here. You're going to see the Reports tab. Then what you're going to do is you're going to navigate. So the far left column will contain the lesson title. So that's whatever your activity or your lesson that you did with your students is called. And it's going to get auto-generated, and it's going to include the date and time that the session was launched. So you can see here a session from October 25th, 2023 at 11:50 a.m. And then the title of the report, it can be edited. So if you don't want to keep it that way, you can always edit that by clicking on the pencil on the far right. And you can label it by class, by group, or whatever meets your organizational needs. Or you can just leave it alone and not move it or change it or rename it at all. The session can be deleted by clicking the trash can on the far right. This is one thing that I cannot speak on. I am not sure if I'm assuming, and you know what happens when we assume, but I think that if I delete the lesson from my lessons, it will delete the reports that go along with it, therefore creating more space to work around that hurdle of the free version versus the premium version. If anybody knows more about that than me and wants to put in the chat whether or not that deletes, but I'm pretty sure. But I left that on there in case you're finding that you're running out of that free space that they offer up. That trash can will delete the reports so that your account is not getting bogged down. And then in the two middle columns, you're going to see that the number of participants for each time of lesson is going to show there. So whether you have 1 student, 20 students, 100 students, it's going to show to tell you how many were there during that session. Okay, so then if when the report page is open, you're going to see the list of lessons that were in there. And then these are always going to put the most recent one that you've completed at the top to the last one that you've done at the bottom. You can use the drop down arrow to open the lesson that you would like to review. So when you first enter into that Nearpod reports, it's going to ask you to drop down so that you can click on the lesson that's in there. Okay, so a lot of people get stuck right in here. They want to click on this. Make sure you go down to the actual session that you're looking for. So on some of these, I've done multiple. So this one has 4 sessions. If I don't want to look at all of the sessions in one big picture, if I want to look at each individual group of students, I need to make sure that I click on that arrow and I pull it down so that I can see each individual class. All right, so we're going to have 3 different types of reports. You're going to have summary reports, you're going to have student reports, and you're going to have activity reports. So we're going to dive into each one of those individually. So this is going to be your large overview of the report that you did with your particular group, so with your class. So this is going to have all of your student names on the left-hand side. It's going to have whether or not, or it's going to have all of your activities across the top. It's going to have how long that each student was in there. So this is your big overview. It depends on what you want to get out of your report, whether this is going to be helpful or it's not going to be helpful. So you have additional viewing options there on the right-hand corner. I have that circled for you so you can download it or you can email it to yourself. When you download it, you get the option of a PDF or a CSV file. And then you can also choose between class report or individual student reports when you go to download that. And then you're going to have the timestamp and the date shown on when the student joined the lesson. So that is going to be most important for those student-paced activities that you do. So those lessons where you're sending them out to your Google Classroom or your Canvas or whatever system that you use so that you can see when your students started it and when they finished it. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how long it took. That's what makes that important. And then also within that summary report, you can review the lesson statistics in the top left corner of the report summary. So you're going to be able to see that it was 14 activities, 23 students, and this was student-paced. And then the summary page includes a list of the students who participated in the lesson. So you're going to have all of your students down this left-hand side, and you're going to be able to change it via last name. So you can either go a Z to A order or an A to Z order. And then again, that's your joined lesson. And that gives you that drop down here if you wanted to change that. What I'm pointing out here is just that it's customizable. So you have this large summary report and it's customizable to your needs. All right, also within there, so this is that same summary report view. You're going to have the scores, the overall scores for each activity. So keep in mind, if you were not part of my very first Nearpod journey and hike that we did, within a Nearpod lesson, you will have potentially multiple activities depending on what you choose. So I just feel like actually I should probably highlight this. So I have one of these kindergarten ones that I've made, and in here, if you see at the bottom, there's 4 different lessons. The point of this one that we're working on is touchpad control. This is for kindergartners. I've just found these off of Canva, made them backgrounds, and the students have to use their trackpad to trace the lines. So each one is just a little bit different, and each one is seen as a separate activity. So then I've got this one's just dragging these little cubes in. Again, we're just working on trackpad control. So when we're talking about this image here, I understand it's small. I'm going to make it bigger, and you're going to see my actual report for these activities here in just a little bit. But what you're looking at here is each individual activity. And this part here is showing you the overall grade or the overall percentage correct based off of that entire class. Then it breaks it down student by student on that left-hand side and gives you that overall summary on that. I just want to make sure I got that all perfect. Okay, and then also, so here's a little bit closer view of that summary report. Each activity that was used in the lesson is listed across the top of the summary report. So I've already said, so each one of those are the activities that are listed across. And then you have your class average for each one posted there. So then if you look at this where it says draw it and time to climb, it says 0%. Does that mean that the students failed that and they didn't get it? No, the 0% means they didn't get to it. They weren't able to complete that in the time that we did. So this is we did this as a whole class. So we were all together. We were doing this during live participation, and we weren't able to get to those 2 activities. So keep in mind that those 0%, that's what's going to show if you don't complete the full thing. So if I come here, let's do this guy here. This was the one that I was showing you it had 4 different activities in it. This one's from April 1st. I'm going to click on this. So where we're going from here is I was just looking at summary reports. I was using just stock photos from Nearpod that wasn't necessarily screenshots on one of my activities that I've done. But we're going to go to the activity report next. And the way that this is going to look is each activity within this lesson is going to be separated out. So that's where we're headed to next. So this is a whole class overview of a specific activity. So activity reports, the first piece of data that you're going to see is the overall response for the specific item. So that's going to be in here, okay? 93% of the students, or 93% participation, and your overall response in your graph form and in its block, okay? So following that will be individual student responses, and this information is going to vary depending on the activity being analyzed. So if you see down here, student, I can click on the arrow, and then I'll be able to see each student individually. So you've got whole class, student. So then you also have the activity name and the slide number that is provided. So that way you can keep track of where you're at. And then you have all the way to the right, there's an overall percentage for the class, what they scored on that particular activity. So think of it as separate worksheets, how they all did on this one particular worksheet, okay? And then this can be based on participation, score, or grade, depending on the activity, and it will tell you what it's showing that percentage for. So because this is a poll that they did, it's just giving participation. If it was a multiple choice question that had a right or wrong answer, that's going to give you a score or a grade over here instead of participation. So it's all going to be based off of what that activity is asking for. In my particular case, it's going to give me participation because each student was just completing the activity. So I've got 94% participation, okay, on this. Then directly below the activity reports option, there's a drop-down list of all of the activities from the lesson, again, listed in order that they occurred in the lesson, and then select the activity that you wish to analyze. So that's where I'm going between here so that I can look, again, think of it as worksheets. There was 3 different worksheets. So I can look at worksheet number 1, worksheet number 2, and the last one, if I can put that in like, paper terms. Okay, so I can click on draw at number 3, see each individual student's progress, and I can see that I had 11% participation. Okay. Mine looks a little bit different because mine are all draws. This is coming from a poll. So that's why my picture looks a little bit different. All right, so in here, we had the summary reports. We had the activity. So here's that finally loaded. I have my summary reports. I have each individual activity. So I had a draw it, and a drag and drop. And then the last section to think about is your student reports. Student reports. So this is going to take each individual activity within the lesson and the full lesson view and give you it all in a pretty little wrapped package for each individual student. So when you click on student reports, I'll show you that again just so that you can see. So I came in here. These are all of the lessons that I've done. I can click on the session that I want to look at. I'm clicking on a different one just so you can see some different views on this. So it starts with summary. That's going to be the default one that it shows you right away. Then you have your activity reports. So remember, that's each individual activity and looking at how the overall class did on that particular activity and how the students did on that particular activity. And then the last option here is to go student by student and view their overall success. And it's going to show it on a broad scale of each activity within there. And you'll be able to see exactly what they wrote on the drawit or drew on the drawit or moved on that. So it gives you a pretty in-depth report. So student reports, and this is going to be the individual data in the student reports section. So each student reports page shows a single student. Either choose the specific student from the list or use the left and right arrows to navigate from student to student. It's going to go in alphabetical order. Okay. So there's that left and right arrow that it's talking about here. And this is showing Adams. So it's going to go in alphabetical order by first name, starting with A. And remember that when you get to student reports, this is Adams' overall participation on all of these. So we had a 69% in overall participation on everything. Also within student reports, each activity indicates either participated, did not participate, the score, or the grade for that activity. To view more detailed information, you got to click the drop down arrow and view the actual response for that activity. So do you see how there's little drop down arrows here? You're going to be able to dive in a little bit deeper because this one was a score out of 40%. You'll be able to see their exact responses and what they put. So you won't just know that he got it wrong. You'll be able to see how they got it wrong. So that you'll be able to go in and see what answer they had actually chosen. I want to show you around from my view. When you're looking at it as a pretty slideshow like that, it almost makes it look like it's so easy to see all these reports. But as you could already see, mine looked a little bit different than the stock photos did from Nearpod. And so I just want to show you that if you're a little bit clunky at first, or if you didn't even know that this was here, it's probably because it's not always the easiest to see. So let me pull this up here. Let's take a look at just ways to make 10 again. That was a live participation. So this is the overall summary. So you can see here that I've got it labeled in alphabetical order here by last name. And I can change this based off of this little arrow here. Okay. Tells me when they joined the lesson and at what time. I guess it doesn't necessarily show me when they ended the lesson. So I guess I end the lesson, so I guess that's why. I bet if it was a student paced and not a live participation, it would put when they finished the lesson and they turned it all in. I guess I have to keep that in mind. So total participation, 98%. It looks like the teacher is who brought that grade down. Well, that's really too bad. And then we had drag and drop and another drag and drop. I believe we were working on making 10. So we were just taking 10's cubes and we were dragging them in to fill in our make 10. And it looks like the teacher didn't complete it, but everybody else did. And it looks like I have overall on my time to climb, I think that that's probably where I would want to get most of my data from this, is because you can see the varying responses and overall scores within that time to climb. If you're not super familiar with the time to climb, if you've ever done a Kahoot or a Blookit, that is Nearpod. So time to climb is Nearpod's version of a Kahoot or a Blookit, and it's very interactive and fun, and the kids really enjoy it. And there are some pre-made there are some pre-made time to climbs within Nearpod. I will say though that there's typically only 5 or 6 questions, and so you will have to add more to them. So that's what a time to climb is. So then back to these reports, we also have activity reports. So if I click on this, it's going to give me each individual activity. So I can navigate between them here or via the arrows. And then again, I'm going to be able to see the exact student response that they've given me and be able to see the exact work that they completed, even if they didn't hit submit on it. So as you're working your way through, that's the beautiful thing about this live participation, is even if they don't click submit, I still get a final picture of how they did. So let's actually navigate to that time to climb here, because I think that that's going to give me my biggest information. So I can see here that this student received a 73%. So I kind of want to check him out. I'm going to take a look. So I want to come down to this time to climb. And this is where I was talking about that. Well, actually, let me slow down for a second. I shouldn't just assume that you knew where I just went. So when I clicked on that particular student, remember I was in activity reports. It automatically navigated me to the student reports when I decided, ooh, I need to look at his overall score or his overall time to climb, because boy, he got a 73%. Where were we missing on this? So now I'm here in the student report. I can scroll down. Again, remember we were making 10. So my time to climb, it shows me the ones that he received correct. And then it tells me, oh, he answered this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Was it just an overall error, or do I need to work on that? And then I can think back and say, okay, during that lesson, did he say, oh man, I accidentally clicked on that? Was he just going really fast and he was trying to win? Or is he missing the concept? So that's the nice thing about the reports that they have here. And this is, the students did fill in these dots. So if I was looking at this before the student completed it, it would not have had any dots other than the green ones. So they filled in the blue to make the 10. Not that that's super important, but I just thought I'd point that out. And so from activity reports, I was able to say, oh, this one has a 73% too. Let's take a look at hers. And again, it automatically takes me over to the student reports so that then I can come down and I can see where we were missing. So it looks like she wasn't able to complete this top one. So that tells me a little bit of information. And then I can come down here and take a look at the answers that she had. So step 3, I want to make sure that I touch on analyzing and collecting data and best practices when it comes to looking at student data on a digital platform. I would hate to sit here and show you all of these wonderful reports, but not leave you with a way to think of it with the bigger, broader picture and best practice when it comes to reading them. So analyzing data best practices that I want you to keep in mind is these 3 main bubbles: meaningful for teachers and aligned to instruction. Aligned to instruction. If you are going to use this to take a grade, what standard or objective are you meeting? Small everyday efforts to observe, note, and provide opportunities for students to demonstrate understanding. I want you to keep in mind that there is great value in combining the macro how all of the students are doing with the micro, the progress of an individual student. So I love that Nearpod gives both of those views. You have that overall picture of the overall score or participation or understanding from each individual activity, as well as being able to go in and look at that micro, that student progress and that student growth. But always make sure you tie it back to the instruction, your overall objective, and the standard that you're looking at meeting. Is the data reliable? You always have to ask yourself that. I listed only 3, but we could probably sit here and troubleshoot and come up with way more. Interruptions. How many times was your lesson interrupted? Where did the student complete it at? Did they do this as a whole group, or did they do this as self-paced? Was it a quiet environment or was it not? Outside factors. This is a digital activity. Computer capabilities. I can tell you that I go to some districts where the computer causes more problems than the actual reward sometimes. So if your student, like that one that got the 73% on that time to climb, the computer wasn't, I can think back to that particular lesson, the computer wasn't working and they were trying to answer it as fast as they possibly could. That student knows his make 10 facts. It's just, there were some outside things. So that wouldn't be reliable data for me. And is your data organized? Nearpod, I feel like, does a great job of organizing its data, and I would trust it to look at it and say, all right, here's what I'm looking at, and I actually know what I'm looking at. Because if it's not organized, you're not quite sure if you're looking at X, Y, or Z. So make sure it's readable, make sure it's relatable back to the instruction and back to that targeted objective that you are overall trying to achieve. So these are just, your 3 big pocket bubbles to make sure you keep in mind. And then analyzing that data in an effective way. Define goals and objectives. You need to make sure that you're clearly articulating with at least yourself what that data is meant for. Is this just big picture student? Do they understand it? Do we need to review it another day? Are they ready for the test? Sometimes that's just the question. Data collection plan and tools. Were they offered a variety of ways to look at this? So there's always, think about those 4 ways of learning: visual, auditory, read and write, and kinesthetic. Nearpod's fantastic for that. If you start diving into those activities, you can find something for each and every one of those 4 modes of learning. And then do you have to take, if the objective or the standard is making 10, do you have to take the overall entire lesson? Or can you look at each individual activity within that lesson and say, Marcus learns best auditorily, and I want to look at that activity that he did. And Sean learns best with moving and getting into that activity. I'm going to take this one and I want to use this as my overall understanding of that standard. I think Nearpod offers up enough variety that you could find different ways that the students learn. And I challenge you to think of it as more of what the student needs and how the student responds to an activity versus the whole class. There's going to be those assessments where you're going to take the whole class, but Nearpod might be more of a activity. And then regular review and update. Just because you used one particular assignment for a grade this year does not mean you need to use it next year. Okay. I was somebody when I taught, so I didn't start this with my background. I taught first grade for 7 years. So first grade is my heart and soul. I love it a lot. And there were many times in those 7 years where I said, this class can't complete this assessment. We're just going to dump this because I'm not going to set my class up for failure. So if you are using Nearpod as a way to collect data, it's not always for a grade. Okay? It doesn't need to be for a grade. It could just be to collect data to say we are ready to move on to the next topic or we're not ready to move on to the next topic, because I see it as 2 different ways. You're collecting data to better understand where your students are at when meeting an objective or a standard, or you're assessing, and assessing becomes a grade. And so think of it in different ways. Make sure you're offering up a variety, and not everything needs to go into that grade book. And just because you used it this year doesn't mean you have to use that same mode for data or assessment next year. And then just some food for thought. This is actually my last slide that I'm going to leave you on here today, other than my thank yous and my little reminders. And I do see that I have a question in the chat, which I will get to in just a second. So, food for thought. Does every student need the same assessment? I don't have an answer for this, but I'm going to give you my thought here, which is Nearpod touches on all modes of learning. If the objective is to complete a specific objective with fidelity, does it come down to a specific task? Are you assessing the task? Or does it come down to the specific question? Are they able to answer the question? Just food for thought. I don't actually have the answer to it, just something that I wanted to point out. Do your students and parents know the objective of the assignment, or objectives, because we can't have more than one at a time, even though they should be separated? If you're going to pull the Nearpod assignment as a grade, and it's going to show up in your gradebook, do your students know what they're supposed to be achieving? Do they know it's going to be a grade? And if your parents look at that, are you labeling it in a way that they're able to understand what was being assessed? Let's go back to that make 10. I was assessing whether or not the student can make 10. And this is what they got. Or am I just using it for data? I'm not actually assessing, which means it's not a grade. Which comes from the green one. Does everything have to be a grade? I don't have an answer. I know what I would lean to, but I'm not going to give you that answer. Nearpod offers a great resource, but does it always need to come down to that grade? How can we use this to move our students up, to burst them up through the different cycles of the standards and the objectives without looking at this and saying, here's all my problems? We can look at this and say, wow, 90% of my class got this. I think I can move on to the next level. Just, again, some food for thought. I just wanted to remind you that the best view comes after the hardest climb. Trying new things is very tricky and it's overwhelming. And it's always nice to find that host or somebody that you can lean off of and ask questions. And once you figure out, I promise you, once you figure out Nearpod, it's worth all of the hassle to learn something new because it is a wonderful tool.
Thanks, Amy. We'll see you on the next hike.